70% complete. That was the number attached to Burkina Faso's new highway between Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso. By January 25th, crews had cleared 232 of the planned 332 kilometers. Less than 2 weeks later, officials announced that the entire corridor had been cleared. It sounded like Ibrahim Traoré's most ambitious road project was already racing toward the finish line. But cleared land is not a highway. There was still no finished pavement, no completed 8-lane corridor, and no public evidence that bridges, interchanges, drainage systems, and safety infrastructure were anywhere near 70% complete. What had advanced quickly was the first stage, removing vegetation and opening the right-of-way. Since then, the project has entered general earthworks. Bulldozers, graders, trucks, rollers, and engineering teams are shaping the route across several work zones. But the deeper construction moves, the harder the test becomes. Near Boromo, illegal gold digging has already damaged parts of the reserve corridor, showing how early progress can be undermined. So how much of Traoré's 332-kilometer highway has actually been built? Is Burkina Faso creating a new economic spine between its political and commercial capitals? Or has the most difficult and expensive work only just begun? To answer that, we must separate the headline numbers from what is physically on the ground. Part 1. Why this highway matters. Ouagadougou is Burkina Faso's political and administrative center. Bobo-Dioulasso is the country's second-largest city and one of its most important commercial, agricultural, and industrial hubs. Between them lie Ouagadougou-Boromo-Houndé farming communities, trading centers, warehouses, and transport routes that move goods across western and central Burkina Faso. Today, this movement still depends heavily on an ordinary national road carrying passenger vehicles, buses, motorcycles, and heavily loaded trucks through the same corridor. That creates a hidden tax on almost everything. When trucks move slowly, fuel consumption rises. When roads deteriorate, maintenance costs increase. When congestion builds around towns, deliveries become less predictable. Agricultural products spend longer in transit, and perishable goods face a greater risk of being damaged before reaching major markets. Those costs eventually appear in the price of food, construction, materials, manufactured goods, and nearly every product transported between western and central Burkina Faso. This is why the Ouagadougou-Bobo-Dioulasso highway is being presented as more than a road. Its proposed route would connect the political capital with the main economic center in the west through a modern, high-capacity corridor. The announced design includes 2 separate carriageways with 4 lanes in each direction, major interchanges, overpasses, bridges, and supporting infrastructure. A reliable highway could reduce travel time, make freight movements more predictable, lower vehicle operating costs, and allow producers in western Burkina Faso to reach Ouagadougou more efficiently. Farmers could reach larger markets. Businesses could build warehouses and processing facilities near the route. Transport companies could schedule more trips, while towns near interchanges could attract repair centers, logistics yards, and new commercial activity. The corridor could also strengthen regional routes toward Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Mali. But none of these benefits is automatic. Local roads must connect farms and businesses to the highway. Transport fees must remain affordable. Security and maintenance must continue after construction, and the pavement must survive heavy trucks and repeated rainy seasons. The real promise is not merely faster cars between 2 cities. It is the possibility of reorganizing how people, food, machinery, and capital move across the country. But what has actually been completed? Part 2. The first 51 days. Construction officially began on December 16, 2025, near Yimdi, on the western edge of Ouagadougou. The first challenge was not asphalt, it was land. Before engineers could build embankments, drainage channels, bridges, or pavement layers, crews had to open a continuous corridor across hundreds of kilometers. Vegetation had to be removed. Survey teams had to mark the alignment. Heavy machinery needed enough space for earth-moving operations to begin. The government defined a corridor approximately 100 meters wide along the route. Instead of moving from one end to the other, teams were deployed in several directions. Work zones were established between Yimdi and Tita Tita, and Boromo and Houndé and Bobo-Dioulasso. This allowed multiple sections to advance at the same time. By January 25th, officials reported that 232 of the planned 332 kilometers, had been cleared. That was the origin of the 70% figure. It was a genuine sign of rapid mobilization. In less than 6 weeks, crews had opened most of the proposed corridor. But the number described the distance cleared of vegetation and initial obstructions. It did not measure completed pavement bridges, interchanges, or traffic-ready lanes. 11 days later, on February 5th, the government announced that clearing had reached the full 332 kilometers. That was an important logistical milestone. Surveyors could refine elevations, earth-moving crews could reshape the terrain, and drainage teams could identify water crossings. But visibility can be deceptive. A newly cleared strip of red earth may resemble a future road when seen from the air. Parallel machinery tracks can look like lanes. Raised embankments can create the impression that paving is close. In reality, the project had only moved from access preparation into general earthworks. By April, officials confirmed that the second major phase was underway. Bulldozers, excavators, graders, rollers, and trucks were reshaping the ground, moving soil, compacting materials, and preparing sections of the future foundation. This is where the project began to face a more difficult test. Clearing measures distance. Earthworks must meet engineering standards. A crew can remove vegetation quickly, but every section of the foundation must be stable, correctly aligned, and capable of carrying heavy traffic for decades. Poor compaction, weak drainage, or unsuitable soil may remain invisible during construction and later become cracks, subsidence, and expensive repairs. The first 51 days proved that Burkina Faso could mobilize equipment and open the corridor at remarkable speed. They did not prove that the entire highway could be completed at the same speed, quality, or cost. Part 3. What the machines are actually building. From the air, the corridor can look simple, a long strip of exposed earth surrounded by graders, trucks, excavators, and bulldozers. But these machines are not all performing the same task. Bulldozers remove obstacles and push soil. Excavators cut into higher ground open channels and prepare areas for culverts or other structures. Dump trucks move soil, gravel, and selected materials between sections. Graders then shape that material into a controlled surface. Their job is not merely to make the route look flat. Engineers must establish the correct elevation, slope, and alignment so vehicles can travel safely and rainwater can move away from the future pavement. Rollers compact each layer. This is visually less dramatic than clearing land, but technically more important. If loose material is covered before being properly compacted, heavy trucks and seasonal rainfall can force it downward, causing the pavement above to crack, sink, or deform. Road foundations are therefore built in layers. Material is spread, adjusted for moisture, compacted, and tested before the next layer is added. Drainage must advance alongside this work. Water flowing across an embankment can erode its sides. Water trapped below pavement can weaken the foundation. A blocked or undersized culvert can flood the road or nearby land. Crews must identify natural water paths, install culverts, shape side channels, and direct runoff away from the highway. Bridges or larger structures may be required where the route crosses rivers, seasonal streams, or low-lying terrain. The available footage shows activity consistent with these early stages: clearing, excavation, filling, grading, drainage preparation, and compaction. That is real construction, but it is not yet a completed highway structure. The corridor still requires engineered foundations, pavement bridges, interchanges, safety systems, and local crossings. This distinction matters because cost and difficulty do not remain constant. Clearing 1 kilometer may be completed quickly. Building that same kilometer across unstable soil, a river crossing, or an urban approach can require far more engineering material, money, and time. Machines prove that the project has moved beyond a ceremonial launch. They do not prove that it is ahead of schedule, within budget, or being built to the required standard. Part 4. For work zones, 4 different tests. The highway should not be understood as one continuous construction site advancing at the same speed. The eastern section begins near Yimdi outside Ouagadougou. This will become the interface between a high-speed corridor and the dense movement surrounding the political capital. Engineers will need safe connections with existing road space for merging traffic protection for nearby communities and a design capable of handling buses, private vehicles, and freight. Moving west, the Yimdi-Tita and Tita-Boromo sections carry the route through the center of the country. During the clearing phase, teams worked simultaneously and heavy machinery was deployed across several points. That demonstrated mobilization. It did not reveal how much foundation drainage or pavement had been completed. A cleared corridor can be measured in kilometers. Earthworks must be assessed through soil quality compaction drainage structures and the readiness of each section to receive the next layer. Around Boromo, the project faces one of its clearest real-world obstacles. Illegal gold miners were found digging deep holes inside the reserve corridor. Those excavations threatened ground stability and interfered with earth-moving operations. The incident reveals a larger challenge. Protecting a 332-kilometer construction zone is itself part of building the highway. Land that has been cleared can be reoccupied. Prepared ground can be weakened. Uncontrolled activity can force engineers to refill, retest, and compact areas that had already been worked. Farther west, the Boromo-Houndé and Houndé-Bobo sections lead toward Burkina Faso's commercial capital and regional freight routes. But public updates do not yet provide a reliable kilometer-by-kilometer breakdown showing how much foundation drainage, bridge construction, or pavement has been completed in each zone. That missing information matters. Footage from one active location can create the impression that the entire corridor is advancing at the same level. In reality, one section may still be undergoing soil preparation, another may be ready for drainage work, and a third may be delayed by terrain access or technical testing. The accurate conclusion is not that every part is equally advanced. It is that active work fronts have been established, the initial clearing phase has been completed, and the more demanding earthwork stage has begun. The next decisive evidence will not be another aerial view of bulldozers. It will be completed drainage structures, verified foundations, bridges, and the first permanent pavement layers. Part 5. Transparency versus capture. 200 billion CFA francs. That is the minimum amount Burkina Faso's authorities said should be prepared in 2026 for the first tranche of the highway. The phrase, first tranche, is crucial. It means 200 billion CFA francs should not be presented as the final cost of the entire project. The full highway still includes earthworks, drainage bridges, interchanges, pavement safety systems, and future maintenance. Public information does not yet provide one complete final price, a detailed expenditure schedule, or a construction percentage for every major component. This is where the project reaches its most important crossroads. Transparency versus capture. In the transparent future, every major payment is connected to measurable progress. The public can see how many kilometers of engineered foundation have passed testing, how many culverts and bridges are complete, how much material has been delivered, and which sections are ready for pavement. Technical inspections identify weak work before it is buried. Agencies are held to clear standards. Communities understand how land, local access, and compensation are being handled. Cost increases are explained before they become permanent facts. In that future, national financing becomes more than a political slogan. It becomes evidence that Burkina Faso can mobilize domestic resources, develop local engineering capacity, and build strategic infrastructure without surrendering control of the project. But there is another possible future, not necessarily one defined by proven corruption, but by opacity. Budgets may be announced as large headline numbers while the public receives little information about what each tranche actually buys. Progress may be measured through equipment deployed or land cleared, while the more expensive stages remain difficult to evaluate. The hidden gatekeepers then become decisive. Who approves the technical measurements? Who certifies that a compacted layer meets the required density? Who authorizes payment when a section is declared complete? Who controls the supply of cement, aggregate fuel, and spare parts? And when resources are limited, which work zone receives materials first? These questions determine whether money becomes durable infrastructure or disappears into delays, repeated work, and repairs. The project also faces an allocation problem. Spending faster protects momentum, but releasing money before testing and supervision are ready can create waste. Moving slowly improves control, yet unfinished earthworks remain exposed to rain and erosion. The correct test is not whether the government can announce 200 billion CFA francs. It is whether each tranche produces visible, technically verified assets, approved foundations, completed drainage structures, bridges under construction, permanent pavement, documented costs, clear deadlines, and eventually a road that survives heavy freight and repeated rainy seasons. Burkina Faso has demonstrated political commitment and rapid mobilization. The next phase will reveal whether the institutions surrounding the machines are strong enough to protect the project from weak oversight cost escalation and premature celebration. Part 6. Mechanisms, not slogans. A highway does not lower prices by itself. The economic effect begins with time. Freight moving between Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso shares the corridor with buses, motorcycles, private vehicles, roadside activity, and traffic passing through towns. Every slowdown adds minutes. Every unpredictable delay forces transport companies to build extra time into their schedules. That lost time becomes a cost. A truck operating for more hours consumes more fuel, completes fewer trips, and suffers greater wear. Uncertain arrival times also force businesses to hold larger inventories. A well-designed highway could reduce several of those costs at once. Faster and more predictable journeys would allow freight companies to plan departures, arrivals, and return trips more efficiently. A truck that completes more journeys with fewer mechanical problems can spread fixed costs across a greater volume of goods. But transport savings matter only if competition passes them through to customers. If a small number of operators control the route, lower operating costs may become higher profit margins rather than lower prices. Fuel costs, tolls, insurance, security risks, and informal delays may also offset some savings. That is why the highway must eventually be judged through actual transport prices, not only reduced journey time. Agriculture provides the clearest test. Western Burkina Faso produces crops, livestock, and processed foods that must reach urban markets. A more reliable corridor could reduce the time perishable products spend in transit. Less spoilage would mean that a larger share of what farmers produce can be sold. The highway could also move fertilizer machinery and spare parts in the opposite direction, helping processing facilities receive inputs and send finished goods more reliably. But the main highway cannot solve the entire logistics system. A farmer far from the corridor still needs a usable feeder road. Produce still requires storage and collection centers. Trucks need fuel repair facilities and secure parking. Markets need enough competition to prevent middlemen from capturing most of the savings. The location of interchanges will matter almost as much as the road itself. An interchange connected to farming zones, warehouses, and industrial sites can attract investment. One placed far from local economic activity may serve fast traffic while providing little benefit to surrounding communities. Bobo-Dioulasso also connects Burkina Faso to routes leading toward Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Mali. A stronger domestic corridor could improve access to regional ports and markets. Yet border delays, customs procedures, and poor roads beyond Burkina Faso can still limit the benefit. The mechanism is not build a highway, then prosperity appears. It is reduce travel uncertainty, lower vehicle costs, limit product losses, connect farms and factories to markets, increase competition, and ensure that savings reach producers and consumers. If those links hold, the highway could become an economic spine. If they break, Burkina Faso may gain a faster road without achieving the transformation promised around it. Part 7. Who wins and who gets left behind? For most people, the highway will not be judged by its lane count or budget. It will be judged by what changes in ordinary life. For a truck driver, the benefit could mean fewer hours trapped behind slow traffic, fewer breakdowns, and a more predictable return home. For a trader in Ouagadougou or Boromo, it could mean knowing that goods will arrive on time. For farmers in the West, faster access to Ouagadougou could expand the number of markets they can realistically serve. But the benefits will not be distributed evenly. Communities near interchanges may attract new services and logistics businesses. Towns bypassed by the highway may lose roadside trade as buses and trucks stop less frequently. Small transport operators may struggle if tolls, vehicle standards, or fuel costs make the new route too expensive. Farmers far from feeder roads may watch trucks pass nearby without gaining reliable access to them. Land is another test. A 100-meter corridor crossing hundreds of kilometers affects farms, paths, homes, and local access. People along the route need clear information about boundaries, compensation, and how they will cross the highway once it becomes operational. Safety must also be designed into the project. A high-speed corridor near settlements can become dangerous if pedestrians, motorcycles, livestock, and local vehicles are forced to cross uncontrolled lanes. Overpasses, underpasses, service roads, and protected access points determine whether the highway connects communities or divides them. The human test is simple. Can a farmer reach the highway? Can a small business afford to use it? Can residents cross it safely? Can affected families receive transparent treatment? And can the growth reach more than the largest companies in cities? If the answer is yes, the highway could reduce the distance between rural production and national opportunity. If the answer is no, some Burkinabe may see 8 new lanes moving past them without becoming part of the growth they were promised. Part 8 tests of real progress. The next phase should not be judged by another ceremony, another convoy of machines, or another aerial view of cleared land. It should be judged through 5 measurable tests. The first is engineered foundation. How many kilometers have moved beyond clearing and basic earth moving into compacted roadbed that has passed technical inspection? A visible corridor proves work has started. Approved foundation proves that a section is structurally ready for the layers above it. The second test is drainage. How many culverts, channels, bridges, and water crossings have actually been completed? Burkina Faso's rainy seasons will expose weaknesses that dry season footage cannot reveal. The third test is permanent pavement. The first asphalt or concrete sections will mark an important transition. But a short demonstration section does not prove that hundreds of kilometers are near completion. Reports should show how much permanent surface has been laid where it is located and whether the foundation beneath it has passed inspection. The fourth test is major infrastructure. Interchanges, overpasses, bridges, and safe local crossings are among the most complicated and expensive parts of the project. Their progress will show whether construction has moved beyond the easier stretches of open ground. The fifth test is financial and scheduling transparency. How much of the initial allocation has been released? What assets has that money produced? What are the next funded milestones? And when does the government expect the first usable section, not merely a cleared section, to open? These questions do not diminish the project. They are the measurements required to take it seriously. Burkina Faso has shown that it can mobilize machinery, divide the corridor into simultaneous work zones, and complete the initial clearing phase quickly. But early speed is now becoming a weaker indicator. From here, progress will be slower, more expensive, and less visually dramatic. It will depend on materials testing, bridge engineering, drainage funding, continuity, and institutional supervision. The real milestone will not be another number describing how much land has been opened. It will be the moment when verified sections of durable highway begin carrying traffic, and the country can measure whether the promised economic benefits are actually appearing. Conclusion. The real test begins now. Burkina Faso has already achieved something significant. In less than 2 months, construction teams opened the full 332-kilometer corridor. Multiple work zones were activated, heavy equipment was deployed, and the project moved from clearing into general earthworks. That is real progress. But it is not 70% of a completed highway. The most difficult stages will determine whether this becomes durable national infrastructure or an expensive corridor that never fully delivers its promise. Foundations must survive heavy freight. Drainage must withstand repeated rainy seasons. Bridges, overpasses, and interchanges must connect communities safely. Financing must continue beyond the first tranche, and completed sections must be measured through engineering results, not enthusiasm or dramatic footage. If completed well, the highway could strengthen the connection between Burkina Faso's political capital and its main commercial center. It could support agriculture processing, logistics, and regional trade. But it will not transform the economy by itself. Success will depend on feeder roads, affordable transport, maintenance competition, public oversight, and whether communities along the route can participate in the growth it creates. For now, the evidence supports 2 conclusions. The project is moving, And the hardest work is still ahead. Burkina Faso has proved that it can clear the corridor and mobilize the machines. The next test is whether it can turn that strip of earth into a safe, durable, and economically useful highway, and whether the institutions behind the construction are strong enough to protect it for decades. Because the final measure will not be how quickly the land was cleared. It will be what happens after the first vehicles begin to move. Disclaimer: this video is produced for documentary, educational, and analytical purposes. It examines officially announced projects, stated capacities, investment estimates, potential economic benefits, and implementation risks. The announced 120 megawatt capacity and estimated 133 billion CFA investment relate to a project that has been launched but has not yet been completed or commissioned. They should not be interpreted as verified operating output or final project cost. This analysis distinguishes between completed infrastructure, announced objectives, projected capacity, and results that still require verification over time. It does not claim that Burkina Faso has already achieved complete energy independence.